Blog Talk Radio.
Stevie B's media production is a part of the Shellcaster Network.
The proclamation of the gospel of Jesus Christ by members of the Churches of Christ. With your host, Stevie R. Butler. You're listening to What a Word from the Lord radio show.
You are my protector, and you are my provider, and my deliverer. There's no other help I know. You are my protector, and you are my provider, and my deliverer. There's no other help I know. I really love the Lord. I really love the Lord. You don't know what He's done for me. Gave me the victory. I love Him. I love Him. And I really love the Lord. Oh, I really love the Lord. Really love the Lord. I really love the Lord. He saved my soul from sin. Love me again and again. I love Him. I love Him. I really love the Lord. And I know how sweet He's been. My deliverer, there's no other help I know. He's such a loyal friend. And on the cross, He bled and died. And now in Him I abide. I love Him. Yes, I love Him. And I really love the Lord. You don't know what He's done for me. Gave me the victory. I love Him. I love Him. I really love the Lord. You don't know what He's done for me. Gave me the victory. I love Him. I love Him. I really love the Lord. You don't know what He's done for me. When I think about His matchless grace, gave me the victory. I want to thank you, Lord. I love Him. I love Him. I really love the Lord.
You're listening to What a Word from the Lord radio show.
Good evening, wherever you are in the world listening to this radio broadcast. Stevie B's Media Production presents What a Word from the Lord radio show. I'm your host, Stevie R. Butler. And this radio show is being broadcast from Stevie B Media Production at the Carolina studio in the great state of North Carolina. Ladies and gentlemen, we're just grateful for the privilege to be able to bring you a program where we as Christians and members of the Churches of Christ can share our faith and preach and teach the glorious gospel of Jesus Christ on a weekly basis. If you'd like to contact us while we're on the air this evening, you can give me a call to the live show at 713-955-0508, or you can go to Blog Talk Radio website and just type in your search bar Stevie B Media Productions or Stevie B, and you'll see the show will pop up there. There are over 1,800 live shows now on that Blog Talk Radio website at this hour, and this show has consistently been on the first few pages of that website. I believe we're on page 3 now of that website, and there are only 10 shows per page on that website, and you will find this show tonight on page 3. Now think about that, ladies and gentlemen, over 1,800 shows that are live right now on Blog Talk Radio, and we're on, and that's something, I don't know what the criteria is, but I just thank God for the blessings. If you have any questions or comments for any of my special guests or co-hosts on this broadcast, you can send your emails to my new email address, butlersteve1009 at yahoo.com, or you can call Stevie B Media Production at the Carolina studio at 910-491-6405. Now, again, this program is brought to you by members of the Churches of Christ, and if you need any assistance in locating a congregation in your area, please feel free to contact us. Now, folks, on tonight's, we have a special edition every fourth Tuesday of the month. We have the Kelli Fletcher Show. She serves with the Livingstone Church of Christ in Indianapolis, Indiana. So enjoy your listening experience. Enjoy the show.
This is Terry Jackson, and you're listening to A Talk with My Sisters on What a Word from the Lord radio show. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Stevie B's Media Production, What a Word from the Lord radio show. I'm your co-host, Kelli Fletcher, with the Livingstone Church of Christ in Indianapolis, Indiana, and you are listening to the Kelli Fletcher Show. Should you have any comments or questions for our guest this evening, please send an email to butlersteve1009 at yahoo.com, and we will be sure to forward your comments and questions to our guests. So just to give you a little background of how I met these ladies, I was watching the morning news on WRTV, a local channel, and they had a segment about my guest tonight. These 3 ladies started an organization which was created to provide support for those struggling with addictions in their close relationships. What they were showing and what they were doing was such an inspiration. I reached out to them. We had a Zoom meeting. I invited them on the show, and they graciously accepted. So I am very appreciative to talk to them. Looking forward to talking to them tonight. But before we get started, we do have 2 of the 3 ladies tonight. I will let them introduce themselves. So, Katie, if you could please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background, and then Jessica, if you can introduce yourself.
Sure, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having us on. We are very, very excited. My name is Katie McCone-Jones. I live in Indiana, where you are, Kelli, and I have a husband and 2 young children, 6 and 3, so just a busy mom, busy working professional, and love doing this passion project that we're talking to you about tonight.
Thank you. Jessica?
Hi. Yeah, hi. I am Jessica. So similar to Katie, working professional mom here in the Indiana area. I'm married to my husband. We've been together for almost 10 years now, and we have a 2.5-year-old. I'm very excited to be chatting with you about our project.
Thank you. Thank you both so much once again. And before we get started with the questions, I just want to let you know that there is no time limit on your responses. once one responds, the other can piggyback with any comments that they have, and we'll just kind of go back and forth until there's no more comments, and then we'll go on to the next question. If something happens and we don't get through them all, that is perfectly fine. We want to try to get as much information and give as much information as possible to our listeners. So, Jessica, if I could please start with you. Can you please tell us what is Recovering To, and how and why did it get started?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to. So Recovering To is, as Katie mentioned, a passion project that myself, Katie, and our other co-founder, Shannon, created basically because we were looking for something like it. So I can tell you that origin story a little bit. So Recovering To is really an organization and a community focused on providing support to loved ones, supporting family members, spouses, anyone that they love and care about through an addiction or their recovery. So why it got started was all three of our spouses ended up in recovery around the same time, and we met at a local treatment facility and were able to form a really good friendship and connection and just support system for one another. After 3 or 4 years of loving and helping one another through kind of our partners' recoveries, but also our own, we kind of just thought about all of the people out there who don't have that support group and just how meaningful and how impactful it had been and just healthy it had been for us. So we wanted to create a community to help others like ourselves and just to kind of give back. And, I can answer any specific questions, but that's the general story of how it got started. And then what it's become is essentially a podcast. So we share our personal stories and share the stories of others navigating this road with their loved ones. Also experts in the space, doctors and counselors, things like that on our podcast, Boy Problems Podcast. And then we also have a monthly support group where we get together on Zoom with women mostly all around the country, sometimes the world, depending on the month. And we just offer a safe space to kind of talk and share experiences and stories and just offer a bit of community to others exactly like ourselves. So, yeah, that's Recovering To.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really inspirational, and I'm sure really helpful for those who are dealing with loved ones or suffering with loved ones who are dealing with substance abuse. Katie, how did you navigate life with a spouse who was suffering from substance abuse disorder prior to attending a support group?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started dating my husband when I was 19 and in college, just having fun. And then after we got married, things, we lived together and things just kind of started to get weird. We kind of just stopped talking. He just kind of was really mean and money was going missing and I didn't know what was going on. So for me, I was blindsided by my husband's addiction. Jessica has a different experience with that. But so after 9 years of being with my husband, did I find out that he had an addiction to heroin and pills. And so it came to light. He had unfortunately a serious overdose and quite a few car accidents that it came out, and it was just like I was at my breaking point where I was ready to leave my marriage. And so after he got in the car accident, he was put in jail, and after that he came clean about what he was going through and struggling through. And so thankfully we live in an area that when we truly are just down the street from a treatment facility, and it was like, okay, well, let's try to get you into this treatment facility. And he did, and thankfully he's stayed on a path to recovery. But it was he had been using since he was 15. It didn't start out with heroin, but he had been using since he was 15. And so it just progressively gets worse. And I think sometimes, when we're talking to people, it's like, well, how did you not know, or how could you be with an addict or something like that? And I think an example that we like to give is, the frog in a boiling pot. You put the frog in warm water and then you eventually boil it up and they die. But if you would throw the frog in boiling water, they would jump out. And so for us, it was kind of that slow simmer. Like if he would have treated me like he did at the beginning of our relationship, I probably would not have pursued the relationship with my husband. But it was just a gradual buildup. And so, for me, you just stop talking to all your friends because, they're kind of acting crazy when you go out and you hang out. And so it was very lonely. And so to piggyback off of what Jessica said earlier about why we started, this disease is very lonely. It's very shameful. And so we want to shed some light on that it is a disease. It is not a moral failing or anything like that. And so we know that we're very fortunate to have somehow randomly found each other in this family support group, because that is not common. And so we know that people live in all parts of the world that maybe, your town does not have any support groups. And so that's, our hope is just to reach those people who are feeling so alone or so ashamed.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. Jessica, did you have anything to add, or how did you navigate life with your spouse?
Yeah, I think mostly mirrors Katie's a lot in that, at the beginning, my husband, when we met, he is a veteran, and after he got back from Iraq, he had sought treatment at the VA. And so when we met, he was actually in a recovery program. And so I was aware of, his challenge. And so it was a little bit different in that regard. But I think that for me, prior to getting connected to a community that really understood what I was going through and what my spouse was going through, I agree. It's just kind of lonely. You don't really know where to turn. No one grows up and thinks of their future husband, as someone who's in rehab. That's just not the life that I kind of envisioned for myself. So I think there's some sadness about that, and like Katie mentioned, some shame, and especially because you're afraid of what other people are going to think of you and your spouse. When I know he's a great person, and I'm super proud of how he's grown since he's started pursuing recovery. But at that very early stage, I didn't know what I didn't know, and it was all very scary, and I agree, kind of lonely. But that all changed. Slowly over time. It's not like I just went to a support group and all of a sudden, but I think it's the same as when you find any community that you relate to, that cares about you, that is a true support system for you. I think that, any time you're in a group like that, it's like a family, and if there are people that you can turn to when things get hard, and it just makes, a burden shared is a burden halved. And I think that has been true for me, that when I have a group of people just supporting me and just being there with me, it makes it much more manageable. So that's the difference in the kind of support group and after we started, both of us, my husband and I, started joining recovery communities. But it makes it a world of difference.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, definitely. Supporting each other and everyone being in a group together. I'm sure that really helps with being able to manage life a whole lot better. So who else is impacted in going through recovery besides the spouses? Who else is impacted, and how does that affect them?
I can jump
in.
And
Katie, I'll address that to you. I'm sorry.
Oh, sure. Yeah, of course. So, really, when you think about it, kind of everybody's impacted in different ways. So for us now, we didn't have children until Kim got on to a path of recovery, but, children are absolutely affected when is suffering from this disease. You can think like my husband, unfortunately, he was stealing money from not only our bank account, but also from his mom. So there's a lot of people that, unfortunately, to, feed their addiction, they have to steal or do just some things that they would not normally do, just because the drug is number one in their life. So children are affected, spouses, parents. You can think like my husband was unfortunately out driving on the roads and got in many car accidents. Thankfully, he never injured anyone. It was mostly just fender benders and things like that. So kind of the population at large when he was driving. And then work too. There's many people that we know and work with who may have a problem with alcohol or different things like that, and they come to work and maybe you have to pick up the slack for them. So I think really it kind of touches everyone. And I guess I'm looking out my window here and my neighborhood was affected. I mean, there was always police at my house or fire trucks and ambulances because, he was overdosing or we had medical emergencies. And so the neighbors, so I think it touches more people than you may think. Jess, anything else on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that, they say that addiction is a family disease. And I think when you think of it in that light, it's really anyone that cares and loves for the person who's affected in some way or depends on them, either in a work situation, as Katie mentioned, or in your family situation. It's something that it doesn't happen in a silo. And even if, in my case, we didn't have, theft and things like that, but it impacted everyone that cared about my husband. So I think no matter what the addiction looks like, what stage it's in, if you care and love about someone, it's really hard to watch them suffer. And, so I agree. I think it's a whole family, whole community affliction, and it truly does require everyone to kind of give this person love, compassion, and support. So I think that both the addiction and the recovery are a whole family are part of the family component.
Okay. So when it comes to, say, small children, how can they recover from this? I know this with you guys, it was prior to children, but for those who may have a loved one and there are children present, Jessica, how can they help their children to recover?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I don't have all the answers, but I can just kind of share from my own experience that, I think, especially as a mother, the first priority for children is safety. Katie mentioned, there are so many components to addiction. It can truly rule, my husband is a great father, but if you were in his addiction, that would be his main motivation, because that's just how the brain works and that's how addiction works. That's a serious thing to think about, where would he take my child, who would be interacting. There's just a lot of rabbit holes you can go down in that. So I think protection of at least my child for me is first and foremost his safety. And then in addition to that, I think that there's also just including the children. Children are smart. They're so intelligent and wise. And, they know things that maybe we don't know they know, or they sense things. And I think just, showing them respect and kindness and, being as age appropriately honest as you can. Your dad is sick. He's getting help. This is how we can support him. And then also supporting them, giving them extra love and support, whether that's their own. There are children-focused support groups for this exact thing. Just more time with family or whatever that looks like for you and your family, whatever would nourish your children. I think that's the biggest takeaways, first and foremost, safety, and then including them in recovery. And I think it can also be, because addiction is a family disease, and it a lot of times is a behavior we turn to because it's maybe what we witnessed, how our parents dealt with life or stress or whatever, or whoever they witnessed with an addiction. You want to set them up to not, follow the same patterns and kind of break that cycle. So I think a big piece of my advice would be include them in the recovery, and don't assume that they don't know what's happening.
Right. Katie, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would say that those groups that Jessica referred to, I mean, there's probably different groups all over, but I'm pretty sure there's Alatot and Alateen, which are groups that are specifically for children. So I think, if someone who has a kid is looking for that, Alatot, Alateen is something that you can search for. I think another part of this is hopefully the parent or the caregiver who is not suffering with the disease can lean on their village, because in the beginning, my husband was early in recovery when I had my newborn, and she had colic, and there was no way that I would leave a screaming baby with my newly sober husband. And so I had to rely on family and friends to help take care of my kids, because I just, with my husband being alone with my kid yet. I know another one of the moms who had a support group, she had 2 children while her husband was in active youth. And, she got in a mom group on Facebook and was just saying like, hey, is anybody in this area? I have to work, so you can hopefully find people to keep your children safe if you have to go to work and things like that. Just, you may have to think of some unconventional ways.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, you said Alatot and Alateen?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that one's for
Am I pronouncing that correctly?
I think Alatot's for like the little ones, and then Alateen is for like the teenagers who are going through the disease with like a guardian or a
Okay. And then one more question before we go to break. Katie, how do you build trust again then with your loved one who is suffering from that disorder? Yeah. And how difficult is it to rebuild trust?
I think that is probably one of the number one questions that we get asked, because trust is absolutely obliterated. There's, just a ton of, really deceitful things that come along with this disease, unfortunately. So something for me, because my husband stole so much money, for us, one thing that we did was I broke apart our bank accounts. He was not allowed access to any of our joint money. His check had to go into an account that I controlled. And so we started very simply with $50. Actually, I think we started with $25 on a debit card, and every purchase he made, even if it was like a $2 candy bar, I think he had to bring me a receipt. And if he didn't bring me a receipt, I told him I was assuming that it was drugs. And so if he wanted to work on this with me, then that was something that he had to do and provide for me, because unfortunately Kroger, he would go take his dealers to the grocery store and then buy the groceries for them in trades for drugs. So I didn't know what to trust. It wasn't always just like these ATM withdrawals. He did it in very sneaky ways. So for me, it was the paper receipts that helped build our trust back, because he could say, I saw $5 come out of the account, and I saw a $5 candy bar receipt. And so that just helped. And I believe what we have always said is truth plus time equals trust. And so that's something for me. It's just little by little, you just can't fully trust, in an instant. You're like, it's just not that way. I mean, it's taken years, and my husband is almost 7 years clean. So it's
okay.
So the bank account's probably a couple years ago.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I am thankful that he is clean for has been for 7 years. So that's amazing.
Yeah.
Jessica, how about you? How did you build trust again with your husband?
Yeah, I think a lot of the same ways. I really like what Katie said about the truth plus time equals trust. I think that's a great thing to consider. I think it's just a lot of small reassurances built up over time, but it's, taken a lot of work, a lot of communication, a lot of compromise. I mean, maybe things that you would that are typical in a marriage, just about a different topic. So yeah, I think just a lot of work together, obviously having, love and compassion, and then just trying to for one another, and then really just trying to work towards the same goal and being there for one another. It's really a partnership for us. But yeah, I think, it just takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, I think. But, when you start to see the work pay off, it really becomes easier. It makes you see that it's truly worth it, and you're building something better than even before as a result, which is great.
Yeah. Well, thank you both so much. We're going to go ahead and go to break, but I do want to say I really appreciate your transparency so far in sharing your stories. We'll go ahead and take a break, and then when we come back, we will get into the roles that Jessica and Katie have with Recovering Too. So we'll be back shortly.
When I think about my Lord, what He does for me, I may not get it at the moment, but I trust His wisdom. Holy, He's holy. He may move my life and replant me where I can grow in His blessing. Oh yeah, the Lord's been good to me. He's been good. Oh yeah, the Lord's been good to me. So good, so good. About my Lord, what He does for me. I could be going through the fire, but He's cool water flowing through me. He's my spirit's protection and my peace. He's the reason I wake up and see. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. Is never more than a hallelujah away. So hallelujah, hallelujah. He's so good. The Lord's been good to me. So good. The Lord's been good to me. The Lord's been good. Yeah. You have been good. The Lord's been good to me. The Lord's been good. Good. Let it loose from your lips the praise that He deserves. The Lord's been good to me. The Lord's been good. Shout it out loud. Hallelujah, 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 the Lord's hallelujah, 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 hallelujah.
Hey sis, this is Genesis Archer, and you're listening to A Talk with My Sister on What a Word from the Lord radio show. Peace and love.
Welcome back to our show. You are listening to the Kelli Fletcher Show, and my special guest Jessica and Katie with Recovering Too. We've been discussing how to navigate life and being with a loved one and a loved one that is suffering from a substance abuse disorder. So I appreciate the information they have shared with us so far. So we'll move on to our questions. So, Jessica, can you please share with us what specific role you play in Recovering Too?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we all kind of do a lot of it's very, very much a passion project and kind of a startup in a sense. So we wear many hats, but I think the thing that I do maybe different than the other girls is I do all the technology, all of our website, and all of anything technical related to all of that setup. I focus on that, and also co-lead our monthly support groups and yeah, so the one thing I typically don't do is like social media, but other than that, really hands-on with the technical side of things.
Okay, thank you. So you have said that you believe there are many paths to recovery. Do you mind giving us one or two examples of those paths and elaborate on what that looks like for individuals that are recovering too?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's maybe easier to think of this as two paths. So you have the person with the addiction, with the disease, they have a path to recovery, and then you have also the family. So we mentioned it's a family disease, and a lot of times the trust, like we've talked about, and other basic like components of how the family works, and us as individually, especially the women of our families, we likely take on most of, the responsibility and things like that. So for the recovering person, so for my husband, for example, there are many different avenues that you can pursue for recovery. Some people are blessed enough to be able to just quit. Some people can do that. And so there's some people that will just be like, I just am tired and I want to quit. That works for some people. I think this is all the reasons that our loved ones use are very individual, and I think that what works to help them quit is also individual. So that's what I mean. And obviously there are paths like my husband took, which were rehab and medical treatment, and his support groups. He lived at a halfway house twice during his recovery. So finding community among men like himself, those things were what worked for my spouse. There are, traditional programs like AA, NA, recovery programs where you go to meetings all of the time and have a sponsor and do things like that. That's probably the more traditional route that most people think of when they think of recovery. My husband did that for a time, but that's not for him. He needs more therapy and things like that seem to be tools that have more of an impact in his specific recovery. So that's what I mean. There are many different ways. I think ultimately the goal is we want our loved ones sober and healthy. And so I'm a true believer that whatever that path is, I support it. Let's just get there. Let's make sure you're healthy and happy and able to give back to our family wholly. So that's what I mean by that. And then so for the other side too, so from my side, for instance, or the loved one, it could be very individual. Maybe you're not a person that really enjoys support groups. I wasn't at first, but I found, such a loving community that it was truly a place that I didn't know I even needed. But I think there are lots of different things you can try, like counseling or, your church community, or there are so many different support networks that you can utilize. We also did couples counseling to help us work on our relationship. So lots and lots of tools available, and a lot of times it's trial and error. And we found that as well. Like we just are willing to try things because we're working towards just one goal of being a healthy, happy family. And, you know, if something doesn't work, we're quick to be like, okay, let's just try the next thing and see what clicks for us. So that's what I mean by the multiple paths. I think whatever makes you whole and happy and supports your family's goals is perfectly fine along this journey.
Okay. All right. Thank you for sharing that. So, when did your recovery begin, and when did you start to take care of you?
Such a good question. You know, I didn't even know any of this, so I can say today, you know, addiction is a family disease, and you need to take care of yourself. But at the beginning, that is absolutely not what I was thinking. I was thinking there's something wrong with my partner. You know, he's acting crazy, and like I don't know what to do, and you know he's gonna die. Like those are the thoughts you have in the moment, you know, because you kind of see, you know, the severity of the disease. So I would say, you know, once my husband engaged in rehab at a treatment center, and that treatment center had a support group for families, I went to that and I started being exposed to, you know, just different components of addiction and other, like people like Katie and Shannon, you know, other women my age in the same stage of life as me dealing with the same thing, or it's like hearing from mothers and grandmothers and siblings and, you know, children that had loved ones in the same treatment program as my husband. And it was just like, things clicked that I'm not the only person dealing with this, which, as we mentioned, you kind of feel like at the beginning, because it does feel so lonely. And, you know, maybe you haven't encountered another person or another family going through this. And especially being a spouse, it's the easiest thing to do is not be with this person. You know, a lot of people just are like, well, you should leave. Sometimes that's not bad advice. So I think once I started getting engaged with other people and seeing them at different stages of their recovery, I was like, oh, the way I'm feeling and reacting is in response to this, and maybe there's something to this. And so it was just kind of seeing some commonalities in other people going through the same thing as me, and then realizing like, oh, I'm not doing really great either, and really kind of trying to take care of myself, which a lot of times just included having boundaries with my loved one, you know, things that I just would not tolerate to protect my own mental health and well-being. So hopefully that fully answers your question, but that's really kind of how I got to the place of working on me. Okay.
Well, thank you. And yes, ma'am, it did answer my question. So I really appreciate the information. Katie, what specific role do you play in recovering too?
Absolutely. I mostly, so I love just like talking to people and trying new things. And so for me, finding guests for our podcast is something that I do. So editing the podcast and putting it up online is a lot of what I do. I recently, my counselor, when I was going through the beginning stages of this, I was like, oh, I'm so mad. I had so much anger. And she was like, you should write a blog. You could help a lot of people. So 7 years ago, I wrote a blog, and it was this whole thing, and I never posted it. But just recently, I started posting my blogs for the first time. I haven't read them in 7 years. And so it's I just started posting them, and it's really neat for me to look back on my real, raw emotions. And I've been doing a reflection on those 7 years later. And that's been really neat to do, because that's just a different way that I was able to express my feelings back then, which was so helpful.
Okay. So you said you are said to ask those spicy, hot, fiery questions that encourages others to look at hard truths. So can you give us a couple of examples of truths those who are recovering too must come to terms with? And how easy is it to face them?
So I think, and Jessica can probably attest to this, that I love to get to, like, I don't want to know about mowing your lawn. That doesn't interest me. Like, I want true, genuine human connections. And so when somebody may ask a question or two about, like, how are you? How's it going? I just keep going often, not out of malicious, but just like, I really want to know, like, what's up? How's it going? And so.
Right. Hello? Katie? Jessica?
I can hear you.
Okay. I think we lost Katie. Well, while we're waiting for her to come back, her phone. Are you there, Katie?
Oh, yeah, I'm here. I don't know what happened.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. We can hear you now.
So sorry about that. I guess where I was going was I just like to ask a lot of questions, and I just keep going, which is what I think the spicy hot fire thing is.
You're trying to dig in and pull out the truth. What's really going on? So when did your recovery begin, and when did you start taking care of yourself?
Yeah, it would be very similar to Jessica. I think going to that family support group, at that point, like, I just had stopped talking to friends, and, at that point I was 20, in my 20s, and it's like nobody else my age can be going through this. Nobody else's husband can be, getting in, 6 car wrecks in a month and stealing tons of money. And so for me, sitting in that support group and just laying it all out on my first group, I'm very open with sharing, and that was just so healing. And so I had been in support groups in the past for different things, and so I know that that's something that I love and that I get a lot out of. And so for me, that was when kind of like a light bulb came off of, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one going through this, and these people have walked this path. And so I just wanted to soak it up like a sponge, kind of like Jessica was saying, like just seeing other people's struggles and victories was so wonderful. And so I knew at that point that that was what I wanted to do and how I needed to heal.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So for our listening audience, Katie, do you have what advice, if there's someone that's dealing with something like this now, what advice can you share with them?
I would share that, at least come to us. Come to the virtual support group. Like, you are not alone. It is not shameful. It is not, you're not, I think stupid comes to my head because I felt so stupid being with my husband. Like, you're just not alone. And so for me, it's like, find a community that you feel safe with that can help you navigate this. So find someone who may have gone through this, and be open, like Jessica said. In the beginning, it's do 90 meetings in 90 days, and you have to do it ABC. But as we've gone down this road, we have learned that, relapses are common, and, meetings works for my husband, but for Jessica's husband, that's not the way. And so recovery is in many different shades. And I think getting education around the disease is huge, and I think that's major.
Okay. And Jessica, do you have any final thoughts or advice you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I echo what Katie said. The first thing that came to mind when you asked that is, you're not alone. There are so many people dealing with this in some capacity in their life. So every family has someone with an addiction. I mean, it's just the science behind it. So I think that's the first thing. You know, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with your family. Like, this is common and there's help. So just to echo what Katie said about, you know, finding a support group, things like that. But then also, I think one of the things I got really hung up on at the beginning was perfection. You know, like it's sobriety or nothing, you know, and I think that this is a really hard thing to overcome, you know, and our loved ones that are able to do it, it's amazing. And I think that, but the road to get there is not always smooth. It's not just you go to rehab or you go to a support group or you go to AA and you're on your way and it's all good from here. That's unfortunately just not true for many, many people. And as a loved one, I was looking to my spouse and wondering, like, when he would have a setback or wouldn't do things exactly like I thought they should be done, it was like, oh, well, you're not doing this enough, you know, like you're not trying hard enough, or it comes back to that moral failing or the willpower. And, you know, over time I've learned, especially hearing other people's stories, that it's just much more about progress than perfection. You know, how are you doing? How is your family doing? And are you better than you were yesterday? And just kind of breaking it down one day at a time. And those days slowly add up. So those are the two things. Like, you're not alone, and, you know, any progress is a positive step forward when you're healing in recovery. So that's what I would say.
Right. Okay, thank you. So can and either of you, if Katie, you want to answer this, can you please share your website and how maybe our listeners can reach you guys for additional information, or if they want to participate or attend a support group?
Yeah, absolutely. Our website is recovering2.com, so recovering then TOO. Our email address is hello@recovering2.com. So you can get to us through our website. You can see our support group through our website. Our support groups are via Zoom. They are the third Tuesday of every month, and they're free. And we would just love to meet anyone there. And our podcast is Boy Problems Podcast. So we have over 85 episodes right now. We've been doing it for 3 years, and so there's a lot of content on there that you can just you can binge it, or you can pick and choose what stories might relate to your circumstance.
Okay, and one more time, can you share the podcast again, please?
Yeah, so Boy Problems Podcast.
Okay, Boy Problems Podcast. Okay. I was making sure I wrote down some information as well. So I do want to thank you two again. I know I've said it before, but I'm really appreciative of you guys being on. I'm thankful that you shared some of your story with us, and the strength and the courage that you guys have had and have while you were working with your husbands. I'm thankful for allowing this platform, giving us the opportunity to discuss really important topics such as this. If anyone in our listening audience has any questions or comments for our guests, please feel free to email butlersteve1009@yahoo.com, or you can email hello@recovering2.com. I believe I wrote that down correctly. Again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for our listening audience. I'm hoping and praying that the topic that we discussed tonight is beneficial and that it will be helpful for you in the future. Everyone have a great evening, and I will turn this over to Brother Stevie. Thank you.
This is Terry Jackson, and you're listening to A Talk with My Sisters on What a Word from the Lord radio show.
You're listening to What a Word from the Lord radio show. You're listening to What a Word from the Lord radio show.